everybody. Welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed, the live television edition. It is Wednesday, 2 p.m. It is June 26, 2013, which is a historic day in the United States. Some big news today, which we're going to talk about. And unless you've been in a cave or, well, I was going to say in a closet, but that's kind of mixing metaphors, I suppose, in this case. But we'll get to that in a moment. So whether you're watching us on IPMNation.com, which I hope that you are, or on TV 23 in Manchester, New Hampshire, and we're also on a couple of other stations now too. We have CCTV in Cambridge and SATV in Salem, Mass, correct?
Yep.
And working on a couple others. So with me, of course, is little Mel. She's our marketing minion at IPMNation.com, and she also hosts No Boundaries Monday night at sometimes at 10:30, sometimes at midnight. Monday night, if you have a guest, it's at midnight on IPMNation.com.
It's true.
So check that out. And we were supposed to have a guest due to a little bit of a technical barrier. He won't be able to join us, but I do want to say hi if he's watching. Micah Will, who we will reschedule at a future time. He's actually out in Colorado, but he was going to join us today. But we'll reschedule that because that didn't work out. But definitely check out his show. He does a political show on IPMNation.com called The Ian and Micah Show. And it's really good. And he's actually been on the radio edition of Unleashed before. And we'll have him back on both versions of the show hopefully soon. So, but definitely check out the Ian and Micah Show. And a very big day, of course, for those who don't know or do know but want to hear what we have to say about it. DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, or as I have always called it, the Indefensible Defense of Marriage Act, was finally struck down today by the U.S. Supreme Court. It is, in fact, unconstitutional.
Oh, I matter now? Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, I wouldn't say that.
Oh.
So we have cameras moving. So today's a very big day, and we'll talk about that, and we'll maybe get to a couple other things too. I have some comments to make about the current immigration debate going on in the U.S. Congress and how fundamentally dishonest some of the rhetoric around that tends to be. And I might say something about Edward Snowden, too. By the way, of course, Edward Snowden, where in the world is Edward Snowden has kind of become a new meme. What I think is funny is if you type in Edward Snowden, if you just Google his name, one of the first things that comes up when I do that is one of those people finder websites. We found Edward Snowden, and then you can go to that website and you can pay $9.99 or whatever to find Edward Snowden. Of course, it struck me as kind of funny. Of course, it's probably a very common name. I'm sure there's a lot of Edward Snowdens out there in the world who are having some difficulty right now because, when you have a common name like that and then the name that you have gets into some major trouble, or as a fugitive from justice, or I've heard horror stories about people with relatively common names ending up on the do not fly list when they go to the airport. So anyway, that struck me as funny. We may get back to that. I'm going to potentially say something very unpopular regarding the Edward Snowden issue. So stay tuned for that. But let's talk about DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, struck down as unconstitutional by the United States Supreme Court in a 5-4 decision. And what do you think, Mel? Are you? I know you're excited about it.
I'm very excited about it.
You were probably more optimistic about it than I was. I didn't think they would strike it down.
I was a whole rainbow of optimism and everything, and I actually started crying when I read the news. I was crying like happy tears and stuff, and I was very excited, and I went on Facebook and I'm like, hooray! Yeah.
Well, I think it's a good thing as well. I didn't cry because I don't possess normal human emotions.
Right.
But no, I've always disagreed with the Defense of Marriage Act, and it's interesting. And of course, Prop 8 figures into this as well. Prop 8 in California.
You mean Prop 8? You mean Prop 8?
Prop 8, yeah, that's a good term for it. The way that DOMA and Prop 8 came into existence, if you will, well, let's talk about DOMA first. DOMA, and this is what I'm not hearing a lot of people talk about today. Everyone's focused on DOMA and what it means. But I do think it's interesting to kind of reflect back on where it came from.
Wasn't it a rider?
Wasn't it what?
It wasn't it a rider to something else?
Well, it was basically, no, it's its own legislation, but Bill Clinton signed the Defense of Marriage Act into law in 1996. And what was happening, for those who don't remember or don't know the history, in 1996, Bill Clinton, in his second term as a Democratic president, was faced with what happens to a lot of presidents at some point, whether it's during the midterms, midway through their first term, or at the beginning of their second term, however it falls. There is very often that moment where the opposition now controls Congress. So you have a president of one party who has to figure out how to work with the opposition of the other party to get things done. Barack Obama, in my view, having to work with a Republican-controlled House of Representatives, has not done very well in that regard. Some presidents figure out how to do it. Now, for someone like me who's a centrist, I consider myself a centrist. I have some liberal views. I have some conservative views as well, but I tend to lean certainly more left than right. And I'm an independent. I'm a former Democrat. I'm not an independent.
Me too.
Yes. But someone like me tends to like, because I'm centrist, I tend to like things like compromise. I tend to like when the moderates of two parties can come together and do something positive and kind of leave the fringes and the extremes out of it. And unfortunately, in the modern era, there aren't a lot of moderates left in the United States government. It's mostly, one of the reasons I'm no longer a Democrat is the Democratic Party in some ways got too liberal for me, and the Republican Party continues to tack way to the right, so I have nowhere to go politically, which is fine. I'll be an independent. I don't mind. I think it was 2007 I kind of decided I couldn't be a Democrat anymore.
I've been independent since I was old enough to vote.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's good. But in 1996, in June of 96, Bill Clinton signed the Defense of Marriage Act. And it was sort of, I think politically, it was kind of a grapevine, if you will, an olive leaf, I should say, olive branch, olive leaf, whatever, leaves, branches. I don't know much about trees. I'm not a botanist or whatever. What do they call
Don't you hate the outdoors?
Treologist.
Too?
I don't like I'm not very outdoorsy. Well, I've never been camping. I don't.
Botanists are like plants and
stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I like to be indoors. I wish I could just teleport from one indoor place to the next. I don't, especially in the winter. But so what did I decide was the correct term? Olive branch to the Republicans, to the conservatives, Newt Gingrich, who he had to deal with, and some others. So there were some compromises made. And again, a centrist like me tends to appreciate some compromise ideologically. But I didn't like this one. And of course, a lot of liberals didn't like this one. Certainly gay people and gay activists didn't like this one. And I've always called it the Indefensible Defense of Marriage Act. Looking at Wikipedia, in fact, it says here, the 1996 Republican Party platform endorsed DOMA. So Clinton was successful in his compromise, reaching out to Republicans, referencing only Section 2 of the Act, which said, quote, "We reject the distortion of anti-discrimination laws to cover sexual preference, and we endorse the Defense of Marriage Act to prevent states from being forced to recognize same-sex unions." The Democratic Party platform that year did not mention DOMA or marriage. In a June 1996 interview in the Gay and Lesbian magazine, The Advocate, Clinton said, quote, "I remain opposed to same-sex marriage. I believe marriage is an institution for the union of a man and a woman. This has been my long-standing position and is not being reviewed or reconsidered." In the same year, in response to a citizen's letter, he also wrote that raising this issue is divisive and unnecessary. So, actually, I'll read a little bit more of this. This is interesting. Some Democrats viewed the legislation as potentially politically motivated, rather than a response to societal developments. Senator Ted Kennedy of Massachusetts called DOMA the Endangered Republican Candidates Act. And we have a call. I'm not surprised. I figured we'd get some calls today. This is a hot issue. Hi, welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed. Who's on the line?
Yeah, hi. I just want to say that I think one of the things we've noticed this week with this striking down of DOMA and striking down of the Voting Rights Act, both in the same week, is that in both 5-4, is that we have a Supreme Court that has 4 ideologues on either side and this one guy in the middle who's actually thinking.
Roberts,
And
right? Chief
that's
Justice Roberts,
kind
yeah.
of scary that there's only one guy thinking. It's good to have that. That's all I wanted to say.
I absolutely agree. Thank you for your comment. Well, yeah, he makes a very good point because Chief Justice Roberts, who we saw this with Obamacare, when the Supreme Court ruled on Obamacare, and a lot of conservatives were furious with Roberts for siding with the so-called liberals of the court in saying that the mandate essentially is in fact constitutional under the Commerce Clause, and that Congress can pass a law with a mandate essentially. I mean, that's kind of the short version of it. So we've seen that again with DOMA, where you have someone breaking with conservatives and deciding not necessarily based on their own political preference and ideology, but I mean, really what the Supreme Court is supposed to do is, ideology isn't supposed to enter into it. It's supposed to be, what is the law, what is constitutional, and how are we supposed to interpret the Constitution. I know some people don't like that phrase, interpret the Constitution. Some people don't like the word interpret anywhere near the Constitution. But it's impossible not to do that, and it's impossible to leave ideology completely out of it inevitably. That's why you have conservative justices, you have liberal justices. I do want to, we'll go to this, Scalia. Antonin Scalia, who has a history, he's of course the Supreme Court justice with a bit of a history of making some bigoted sounding comments against homosexuals, says this. And one of the things, whenever something like this happens, it's always interesting to me to see how conservatives will react to it and some of the fascinating things they'll say. Sometimes politically suicidal. Rick Santorum, for example, is known for making some politically suicidal comments. God bless him. But it's very entertaining stuff. But Antonin Scalia says this. He says, this is from Huffington Post. A day after siding with 4 other conservative justices to overturn a portion of a nearly 50-year-old civil rights law that maintained broad bipartisan support, Justice Antonin Scalia lashed out at the Supreme Court for intervening in the gay marriage debate. When it came to protections for minority voters, Scalia had no patience for democracy. By the way, obviously this article is written with a pro-gay marriage slant, but Scalia had no patience for democracy, specifically noting that the court should overturn the law because it's too popular to overturn in Congress. But as far as protections for gay and lesbian couples are concerned, Scalia would prefer the court stay away. The court struck down the Defense of Marriage Act on Wednesday in a 5-4 decision. In a dissent choked with rage, Scalia dismissed the majority's reasoning as legalistic argle-bargle. That's his term for it.
That's
Obviously, if someone doesn't agree with him, that's I love when people do that when they argue that someone disagreeing with them is argle-bargle or.
Is that an actual word? Or did you make that up?
It's I've heard the term argle-bargle before.
I've never heard that term before.
Typically, I've seen it in comic strips. I've never.
Oh, well, that just makes it so much more serious.
I've not heard a Supreme Court justice in the past refer to something as argle-bargle because he doesn't agree with it. That's how a lot of people are. If you don't agree with them, they talk to you like you're stupid or you're just not thinking or argle-bargle or something instead of concluding that perhaps you just come to a conclusion that disagrees with them. So it's anyway. I would hope a Supreme Court justice would discuss something that he agrees with a little bit more coherence and be a little more articulate about it. But anyway, we go on. Scalia's dissent is less a legal argument and more a plea for recognition that there are good people on all sides. In it, he repeatedly played the role of victim, complaining that it is unfair that his opposition to gay marriage is no longer considered legitimate. It's the same type of thinking that, and by the way, people, I'm not just picking on, I think Republicans play this card more, but both sides do this. Both Republicans and Democrats do this thing where they refer to judicial activism. They refer to activist judges when someone does something, when a judge makes a ruling that they don't agree with or changes something that they don't like. It's changed that they don't like. They refer to it as, I won't be surprised if the term activism shows up somewhere in this article. He says, quote, "It is one thing for a society to elect change. It is another for a court of law to impose change by adjudging those who oppose it that's Latin, hostis humani generis, forgive me for butchering that, enemies of the human race," unquote, Scalia wrote, accusing the majority of, quote, "declaring anyone opposed to same-sex marriage an enemy of human decency. In the majority's telling, this story is black and white. Hate your neighbor or come along with us," unquote. That is, choked with rage is putting it mildly. I mean, that's a pretty wild way to react to not getting your way, Justice Scalia. Going on, he says, quote, "To hurl such accusations or so casually demeans this institution," said Scalia before using his dissent to re-argue the legality of sodomy. Yes, we're going there with this, or he is. "Wednesday's decision was inevitable," he said, "when the court sanctioned homosexual sodomy, and striking down the Defense of Marriage Act will inevitably lead to fully legal same-sex marriages." Yes, by acknowledging that gay people should enjoy the same rights as everyone else. Of course, you're therefore endorsing homosexual sodomy. This is a typical... This drives me nuts about conservatives who tend to think that by allowing homosexuals to have the same rights as everyone else, by allowing gay rights, by even acknowledging that there are gay people in the world, you're somehow forcing that on everyone else. You know, they think that there's, for example, one of the most unintentionally hilarious phrases I've ever heard Sean Hannity use is the gay militant agenda. And really all these are people who believe in gay rights and who are gay activists and who think that gay people should have the same rights as everyone else. No, to him they're the gay militant agenda because they want to turn everyone gay or something. I think that's what some of these people really think.
Well, I don't appreciate these heterosexual people with their straight agenda trying to turn me straight and everything.
I know, right?
Right?
Well, sorry about that.
I know.
I hope you don't think we're all like that. Because certainly all gay people are like that as far as the way these people think. They all want to, it's funny. I have several gay friends who haven't actively tried to turn me, but I assume it's coming. One of these days they're going to try to recruit me to be gay.
Yes.
I'm sure. Especially now that they can get married and that's becoming more and more prevalent. It's only a matter of time until we all turn gay.
I hear there's like a hazing and a ritual that you go through and stuff.
I'm sure there is. And
yeah.
I'm as someone who is currently heterosexual, I'm repulsed to think what that might involve. But I suppose, once they start to successfully turn me and recruit me and, then it'll all be good. But unless I go and have, Marcus Bachmann, of course, the husband of Michelle Bachmann, who is himself clearly ambiguously gay. I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard Marcus Bachmann speak, but he's clearly, I think there's a reason why he's so anti-gay. He's clearly hiding from something. But anyway, he has that pray away the gay thing, where you can go and Jesus will help you to not be gay. So we have a firewall against the gay militant agenda. We have Marcus Bachmann who will help us pray away the gay. So even if the homosexuals do manage to recruit someone like me and turn me gay with their gay militant agenda, which Antonin Scalia is obviously very concerned with, I can go see Marcus Bachmann and he can get Jesus to help me not be gay anymore. So that's exciting.
That is.
Or I can just choose to not be gay anymore, right? Because some of these people think you choose to be gay.
It's a choice.
So if you choose to be gay, you can then turn around and choose not to be gay, I suppose, right?
Right.
I wonder how that works. I wonder if there's paperwork involved in that. Like, do you have to fill out a form? Like someone like me, I mean, I'm sure it's different if you decide before you're 18, but if you decide as an adult to turn gay, or if you've been gay and you decide to turn not gay anymore, I wonder if there's paperwork involved in that.
Well, I wonder what they would think for people like me, because I'm polysexual, which means I'm attracted to straight, gay, bi, and like some transgender, so I'm like all over. I'm not like either black or white, so I wonder what they think of me. I wonder if they're like, well, she likes heterosexual, so I think but then she likes gay people.
Well, judging from the comments that some of these types of folks like to make, I would assume that they would assume that you also are attracted to trees and cars and all kind of buildings and everything else. Because, you allow... I mean, just ask Rick Santorum, or you allow people to get married and who are gay, and next thing you know, all kinds of terrible things and bestiality and everything. Anything goes. If you allow gay people the same rights as everyone else, it's anarchy. It's pandemonium.
People, if we're not careful, they're going to want to marry their dogs because, as we know, a dog can sign a marriage license.
Yes. And that's awful for the dog because then the dog is going to go to hell too, I would assume.
Poor dog.
Because that's even worse than especially, what if it's a gay dog?
Right.
What if a gay human marries a gay dog?
The world would just be in shambles.
I know.
It would fall apart.
Absolutely. It's terrible, terrible things that can happen. Let's see. Oh, there's more about Scalia, by the way. I'm sorry, I love this kind of stuff. I love the way conservatives react to this kind of thing. Oh yes, the homosexual sodomy. I say that with apologies. I realize it's only 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but it's news.
This is family programming.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is family. Glenn's going to run in here. This is family programming. No, Glenn understands that. I'm reading from Huffington Post. That should make it okay. So he goes on to say, quote, when the court declared a constitutional right to homosexual sodomy, we were assured that the case had nothing at all to do with whether the government must give formal recognition to any relationship that homosexual persons seek to enter. Now, we are told that DOMA is invalid because it demeans the couple whose moral and sexual choices the Constitution protects. Ante at 23 with an accompanying citation of Lawrence. That refers to, I forget the name of the case now. We'll come back to that. He goes on, it takes real cheek for today's majority. Real cheek? I don't think I've ever heard that term.
No.
I suppose that's like being cheeky. If you're being cheeky, someone said.
I think that's what they mean.
Phrased quite this way. So I'm actually learning something from Antonin Scalia. I'm learning a new phrase. It takes real cheek. I think it takes real cheek of Antonin Scalia to say these things. How do you like that, Antonin Scalia? Justice Scalia, if you're watching. Which I'm sure he is.
I think it probably means it takes, like, cojones.
Yes, cojones and cheek. Takes a lot of cojones and cheek. It takes real cheek for today's majority to assure us, as it is going out the door, at least he didn't say as it is going out of the closet.
Yeah.
He wouldn't be that clever. That a constitutional requirement to give formal recognition to same-sex marriage is not at issue here, when what has preceded that assurance is a lecture on how superior the majority's moral judgment in favor of same-sex marriage is to the Congress's hateful moral judgment against it. I promise you this, the only thing that will confine the court's holding is its sense of what it can get away with, unquote. Yes, because clearly, by the court not going along with what Antonin Scalia, Justice Scalia wants, they're trying to get away with something. I'm surprised I have not yet encountered a quote from him referring to his colleagues in the Supreme Court as activist judges. I'm sure it's coming. There's a little bit more. Along with debating sodomy, Scalia drew a connection to polygamy. Oh, here we go. To polygamy, noting, quote, the Constitution neither requires nor forbids our society to approve of same-sex marriage, much as it neither requires nor forbids us to approve of no-fault divorce, polygamy, or the consumption of alcohol, unquote. Scalia argued that the question of same-sex marriage should be left to Congress and the states. He's, by the way, the Supreme Court is one of the three branches of government. We don't elect them directly, but we do elect presidents who then nominate these justices, who then have to be confirmed by the Congress, who are elected by the people. So it's not as though, it almost sounds like he's saying that, and some would make this argument, that the Supreme Court is such an autonomous body of our government that they can just make these decisions without any connection to the people, to the citizens of the United States. And it sounds like that's kind of what he's implying there. But that's really not the case. They have more autonomy than the executive and the congressional branches of government because they're not directly elected. They are put there again by a president who nominates them, who then has to get them through the confirmation process, and they're confirmed by the people who we elect. So it's a little bit more circuitous that way. But I don't think by his saying that this ruling suggesting that this ruling somehow violates the will of the people, I think he's way out on a limb there. He said, quote, "We might have let the people decide, but by the way, if you look at any poll, the people have already decided that they wanted DOMA gone." So his argument really is pretty asinine. But anyway, "We might have let the people decide, but that the majority will not do. Some will rejoice in today's decision and some will despair at it. That is the nature of a controversy that matters so much to so many. But the court has cheated both sides, robbing the winners of an honest victory and the losers of the peace that comes from a fair defeat. We owed both of them better. I dissent." So he's pretty angry and freaked out, Justice Antonin Scalia, over the today's striking down of DOMA. I talked a little bit about how we ended up with DOMA. The same way, by the way, that we ended up with Don't Ask, Don't Tell for the military that we had for so long. Again, it was the Clinton. Well, that one happened a little bit different, but that also was under the Clinton administration. Because Bill Clinton, I would argue, was very much a centrist president, which I think, or some would say he was forced to be by Newt Gingrich and the Republican Revolution that happened in '96 in the Congress. But if you judge him strictly based on legislation and his accomplishments, certainly the fair trade president, I mean, very almost economically conservative in some ways. But not only, because he was intent on being so centrist, or we had that term New Democrat, not only did we end up with the Defense of Marriage Act, or the Indefensible Defense of Marriage Act, as I like to call it, but we also ended up with Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which I will confess, at the time, I thought was a pretty decent compromise. Not foreseeing, as so many people did not foresee, all of the other problems that would result from that compromise. But for those who don't remember, Bill Clinton, right at the beginning, when the Clinton administration took office, the first thing they tried to do right out of the gate was overturn the ban on gays in the military. And I think they thought it was going to be easy. And they meant well. I don't think Don't Ask, Don't Tell was on their radar. They thought, we're just going to get in and we're going to overturn the ban on gays in the military. I distinctly remember back then MTV, and I think they still do this in some form at election time, it was one of their very first Rock the Vote campaigns, and they had.
I remember
you remember that?
I do.
And Bill Clinton. This is where I believe the famous boxers or briefs moment came from, when they had some kid ask Bill Clinton, "Do you wear boxers or briefs?" It was they had done this special. It was actually Anderson Cooper, a young Anderson Cooper, was the moderator of this, where Bill Clinton was taking questions from, this was during the 1992 election. He had already won the nomination and was on his way to beating George H.W. Bush for the presidency. And he was taking questions from a very young audience of voters. And they were about to go to a commercial. So maybe his answer, because Bill Clinton tends to ramble, as perhaps I do at times, and tends to answer questions quite extemporaneously, but he was very quick on this one. And again, it might just be because they were going to a commercial, but someone asked him point blank, one of these kids asked him, "If you are elected president, will you overturn the ban on gays in the military?" And instead of going in a long-winded answer or anything like that, he simply said, and very firmly, he said, "Yes, I will." And that was it. That was all he had to say, and he was very firm on it. So he was very clear on that position. Clinton administration gets in. One of the first things they try to do right out of the gate is he tries to sign an executive order overturning the ban on gays in the military. And I believe, just like the Bush administration thought Iraq was going to be easy, I think the Clinton administration thought overturning the ban was going to be easy, and they had no idea or preparation for the crap storm that they were flying into with that. And so we ended up, after a lot of wrangling, we ended up with Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So, and of course, that's now gone. So we're moving in the right direction, but it is interesting that it was a Democratic president. Some would argue a liberal Democratic president. I would argue he is very centrist. But it was a Democratic president who gave us both DOMA and Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Then we move on to Prop 8. And there's a little bit of an uncomfortable truth behind how we ended up with Prop 8. Now, Prop 8, of course, is in California, where they put it up on referendum. Referendum, of course, where anyone goes into the voting booth and you vote on an issue. It's the closest thing we have to a direct democracy, where instead of having to elect someone to then cast your vote, hopefully someone who will vote in the way that is in line with your values and your stance on the issues, you're going right into that voting booth and you're voting directly. And Prop 8 was on referendum, was on the ballot in California in 2008. One of the fascinating things about politics to me is sort of the law of unintended consequences. And this does relate to Clinton giving us, just bear with me, it does relate to Clinton giving us DOMA and Don't Ask, Don't Tell in a way. Because it's something occurring that actually opposed gay rights that a Democrat brought to us. Although in Obama's case, unwittingly, it just happened to work out this way. Prop 8 was on the ballot in 2008, and the reason, now you wouldn't expect it, intuitively, you wouldn't expect in a state like California, a blue state tends to be a liberal state, you would not expect the voters in California to vote for Prop 8 overturning gay marriage in that state. But because we had an African-American candidate for president, of course, he turned out the African-American vote in California. You had record numbers of black voters going in, understandably so, to vote for Barack Obama. Well, I think this has changed, and I think if you look at polls and recent research, this has changed in a relatively short time between then and now. Culturally, I think there's been a shift. But historically, African Americans in the past, even those who will tend to vote Democrat, which actually is most African Americans, have in large numbers opposed gay marriage. So you had in 2008 a situation where you had all these blacks going in to vote for Barack Obama, who while they were at it decided to vote against gay marriage. It's a law of unintended consequences, and it's fascinating to me that kind of thing can happen. And it's one of the really interesting things about politics. Says here, according to Wikipedia, Prop 8 was a California ballot proposition and a state constitutional amendment passed in the November 2008 state elections. The measure added a new provision, Section 7.5 of the Declaration of Rights, to the California Constitution, which provides that only marriage between a man and a woman is valid or recognized in California. By restricting the recognition of marriage to opposite-sex couples, the proposition effectively overturned the California Supreme Court's ruling of in remarriage cases that same-sex couples, in remarriage cases that same-sex couples have a constitutional right to marry. The wording of Prop 8 was precisely the same as that which had been found in Proposition 22, which had passed in 2000 and, as an ordinary statute, had been invalidated by the state Supreme Court in 2008. So the state Supreme Court had already struck down a proposition because just because the people go in and vote for a particular proposition, if they vote in favor of it and it wins, that doesn't automatically mean that it's going to be deemed constitutional. So Proposition 22, which was similar to Prop 8, had already been deemed unconstitutional. So the California State Supreme Court had already ruled you can't do this. California State Constitution put Proposition 8 into effect the day after the election. So immediately, Proposition 8 went into effect. The proposition did not affect domestic partnerships, or civil unions as they're often known, in
The
California.
skim milk of marriages.
Yes, that's a good way of putting that. By the way, I at one time thought civil unions was a good compromise too, and I see the error of that now. There should never have been any compromise on. Well, maybe there had to be though to get where we are now, or where we're headed, which I hope is. But I did at one time.
I wonder, like, what, because, like, I didn't know about DOMA or, like, Don't Ask, Don't Tell until, like, years later, and when I was, like, very much, like, a gay rights activist, and, like, I wonder what I would have thought about it, like, had I known, because, like, when they came out, like, I was between, like, 9 and 14, 13 years old, so I probably, like, for lack of a better word, didn't really care at all, which is funny, because Bill Clinton is the first, he's not the president that when I was born, but he's the first president that I really remember, and I remember the Rock the Vote, like, I can actually, like, picture the MTV studio
you can find it on YouTube,
in my head, and I remember the boxer brief question.
Anderson Cooper wasn't even completely gray yet. Back then.
I remember Anderson Cooper.
Yeah. And one other thing about this, the proposition did not affect, I'm sorry. It did not affect same-sex marriages performed before November 5th, 2008. Because one of the potential debacles of Prop 8, aside from the fact that if you believe in marriage equality, it's just flat out, Prop 8 was just flat out wrong, but one of the other potential pitfalls was that, okay, so is there a danger of this invalidating now all the same-sex marriages performed in California already? So, but that's how Prop 8 came into existence. Had we not had a black candidate for the presidency on the ballot in 2008, Prop 8 may never have happened. But Prop 8 now has, even though the court didn't address it directly, it's been vacated. It's been remanded by today's ruling against DOMA because now, effectively, Prop 8 has been deemed unconstitutional. So a big day. So both DOMA and, by extension, Prop 8 have now been invalidated. We almost had a similar situation as Prop 8 in New Hampshire here not long ago because New Hampshire, of course, some years ago made same-sex marriage legal here in New Hampshire, and then
what year was that?
Within the last year, I'm not sure actually what year that was. I forget. It doesn't seem. I mean, it's certainly been less than a decade. But we had within the last year a big drive. In fact, Gary Hopper, with whom I'm his co-host on Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades, and he'll probably have something to say about all this later. I know it's not our main topic tonight on the show, but I'm sure he'll have something to say because he's vehemently. This is something he and I vehemently disagree on. He opposes same-sex marriage, and he was very much in favor of repealing same-sex marriage in New Hampshire when it almost happened. It was on the ballot. I'm sorry, not on the ballot. It was they were debating it in the New Hampshire state legislature whether to actually repeal same-sex marriage in New Hampshire. Something I really, really like about John Heichel, the Honorable John Heichel, New Hampshire State representative, who has been on this show several times now, actually, and a very frequent guest on Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. John voted against the repeal, but it's interesting because he voted against gay marriage initially, but he voted against repealing it because he didn't feel it was appropriate to repeal rights once they had already been granted. And we have a caller. Hi, welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed. Who's on the line?
Hey Matt, how you doing?
Norm, hello.
Hi, Norm.
Hey, I'm listening to your conversation, and I would like to on our show to continue what you're talking about with the gay marriage and stuff, if you don't mind. I think this is very interesting.
Outstanding. I was hoping to do that, actually. That would be fantastic.
Okay, we're going to have Bob Whitebear on.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. I love Bob.
Let's hope we can get Gary Harper in there, too.
I hope so. I hope he shows up early.
Yeah, so let's make it really interesting. We'll keep promoting your show, and we'll keep it going on my show. Our show, I'm sorry, our show.
That's all right. Sounds great to me, Norm. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, I'll see you in a bit. Bye-bye. All right, so that is, of course, Norm Moody from Norm and Friends. So coming up today at 4 p.m., we will continue the discussion that we've talked about today Norm has a perspective on it, of course. Norm is openly gay, so it'll be good to hear from. But see, Norm is interesting because Norm, even though he's gay, he's not a big fan of, like, he doesn't like the gay pride parades, and I don't know if he actually is vehemently even in favor of same-sex marriage. So it'll be really interesting. Or I think maybe he's okay with civil unions but doesn't feel the need to. I don't know. It'll be really interesting to hear. I'm really looking forward to Norm and Friends today. I always do. It's one of the highlights of my week, but especially today. I really want to hear what Norm has to say on this. That'll be really interesting. And hopefully Gary does join us early, as he sometimes does, because I'll be interested to hear what he has to say about it as well. But I think this is a great thing, and my hope is, my hope is that ultimately we get this to the point where nationally same-sex marriage is legal. One of the things that's troubling to me is by it not being legal in all states, I don't think it's right that same-sex couples have to worry about, if they're in one state where it's legal, if they move to another state, is their marriage now not recognized? Is it legally invalidated somehow? I would like to see something done nationally. What's that?
Confusing.
Yes. I know that I don't want to speak for him, but I do know that one of the things that Gary has said regarding his opposition to same-sex marriage is that he very much believes, because he's very pro-family, he's very pro-marriage, and he feels very strongly that marriage has to be protected as an institution, as between a man and a woman, to protect the sanctity of marriage. And I think there's some religious aspect to that too, protecting the sanctity of marriage. I know that people who are very religious and Christian, the Catholics, I was raised Catholic, they call it one of the 7 sacraments. It's a sacrament given to us by God and whatnot. And by the way, all the pro-family stuff that Gary talks about, when he talks about the importance of marriage, the importance of a 2-parent home, and how, all these broken homes are bad and whatnot, and how children of broken homes who are being raised by a single parent, they're at a disadvantage and whatnot. I agree with all of that. Everything he says about the importance of marriage in our society. I mean, I'm personally not interested in ever getting married, but I'm also not interested in having kids. If I were going to have kids, I would want to get married. Not that I'm in any way demonizing parents who have kids out of wedlock. I agree with the whole concept of the family unit and all of that. I agree with all of that. So when Gary talks about all that, I'm 100% in agreement. Where we part company, though, is Gary and folks who make that argument, they see allowing for same-sex marriage as weakening the institution of marriage, whereas I see it the opposite. I see it as actually strengthening the institution of marriage. I see allowing more people, regardless of their sexual orientation, allowing more people to actively participate. I think it actually strengthens the institution, and I think it's encouraging. And and this is an original thought. A lot of people have made this point, but we exist in a culture where you can be straight, you can have a straight marriage, but still do things like go to Vegas and do a drive-through wedding.
Yep.
Or if you're a celebrity, get married for a couple days and then get a divorce or an annulment or something.
Yeah.
There are all kinds of ways that straight heterosexual people chip away at the sanctity of marriage and do things to disrupt it and destroy it. And yet, letting gay people get married, that's somehow going to ruin the whole thing. There are also a lot of folks, of course, who still believe that it's a lifestyle, choice to be gay.
Why would you choose that, though?
Right. To me, it's completely asinine. No one chooses to be gay. I didn't choose to be straight. I don't remember at a point during my development growing up where I had to make a conscious decision, so which way do I want to go? Do I want to be attracted to girls or do I want to be into dudes, I mean, I got some decisions to make here. Let's see. I think I like chocolate better than vanilla. And I think I like Pepsi better than Coke. And I guess I like girls better than boys. I don't know. I guess I'll go with that. That's what my friends are doing. I'll go along with them. No one chooses to be gay. It just, and I say that for 2 reasons. Number one, no one chooses to be straight, so it doesn't make any sense to me that anyone would choose to be gay. You clearly don't choose your sexuality. And number 2, the other reason why I believe that is because that's what gay people tell me, and I figure they're the experts. So if a gay person, like Norm, for example, if Norm says, well, I didn't choose to be gay, this is just how I turned out, I tend to believe him because, you know what? He knows a lot more about being gay than me. I've never been gay, so what do I know about it?
There's a really cool video online, and I forget who does it, but it's someone he's like walking up to random people on the street, asking them, you know, do you think people are born gay? Do they choose to be gay? And a lot of people were answering, well, I think people choose to be gay. And he just goes, so when did you choose to be straight?
Right.
And they're like, and they can't answer because when you flip it around.
Yeah.
And then there's like other stuff that has people holding signs that are like, do your parents know that you're straight? Have you talked to your friends about being
That's good.
straight?
Yeah,
Just like switching it.
Yeah. It's not a choice. I mean, that's just silly to me. And it's silly to me that in the year 2013 there's so many people who still believe it is. I know a lot of people who do believe it is, so I say that with respect, but to me it just seems ridiculous.
I just don't, like, you made a comment, like, a while back when you were reading that, you had made a comment about Bill Clinton saying that he is, like, for marriage between, like, a man and a woman and all that. And
he hadn't had the evolution that Barack Obama had.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, it's... And I think this is what a lot of anti-gay people don't understand. It's perfectly fine if your opinion is you're against gay marriage. Like, that's fine. That's your opinion. Mm-hmm. It's when you start forcing that opinion on other people.
Yeah.
And, you know, when Bill Clinton said, you know, this is what I believe, fine. That's what you believe.
Right.
What Joe and Jim across the country do, I don't understand why people think that affects them at all.
I will tell you this. In the case of Bill Clinton, and this is not a defense, but it's an explanation that this is what I think. This is my theory. He may have never, I think he's basically a liberal thinker. He may have never actually believed that. I think it was for the sake of political expediency. He had to, welfare reform, another thing. Bill Clinton signed welfare reform into law. He did it with a big smile on his face with Newt Gingrich standing right next to him. And I'm not arguing against welfare reform. I'm just saying that at the time, a lot of folks on both sides of the aisle did think it was necessary. But I think Bill Clinton did a lot of things. He's not above doing things, you know, I mean, he got the name Slick Willie for a reason. He was not above doing things for the sake of political expediency. Something about Bill Clinton, I think in a lot of ways he was a highly effective president. But there's also some things I don't like about him. And I'm not talking about the whole Monica Lewinsky thing. I really don't care. This is something that most people probably don't even remember. 99% of the people I bring this up to don't even remember this. But I've never forgotten it, and I've never forgiven him for it. Anyone who knows me and has heard me discuss the death penalty knows I loathe the death penalty.
Me too.
Absolutely loathe it. Not because of the old line liberal arguments about, well, you know, you can't have the state executing people just because someone commits a murder. It's not, the state doesn't have the right to do that and all that. No. It's got nothing to do with any of that. It has to do with the fact that mistakes are made. It's an imperfect system, and it's too much of a risk to take with someone's life. Look up the stats. It happens all the time. People are convicted of something they didn't do, including murder, and then we find out later they didn't do it.
It also costs more to keep someone on death row than
absolutely.
in prison for life. And I'm also very much against the death penalty. And I just part of why I'm against it is what you said, but I also think it's hypocritical.
Yeah, I don't really go with that part.
That's just part of my reasoning.
If it were a perfect system, I actually think I might be okay with it. If you commit a murder in cold blood, all right, well, we don't need you around. But it's not a perfect system. It never will be. As long as human beings are involved, it'll never be perfect. And it's too much of a risk to take. You know what Bill Clinton did? During the 1992 campaign, he had not, I believe he had not yet clinched the nomination. Mm-hmm. He was not yet the nominee, but he was on his way to becoming the nominee for president. Another thing, okay, so he's this new Democrat. He's not this old line Southern liberal. He's a new Democrat, and he's really pushing that new Democrat thing. One of the knocks on Democrats at that time was that Democrats are soft on crime. You know, Republicans are tough on crime, but Democrats, these bleeding heart liberals, they're soft on crime, right? So Bill Clinton, to prove how tough he was on crime, what did he do? There was in Arkansas, he was the governor at the time of Arkansas, and there was this guy who was going to be executed because they had the death penalty, and I think they still do. They had the death penalty in Arkansas, and Bill Clinton was pro-death penalty at the time. He has evolved. He's going through his own evolution on this now. He says he opposes it now. But at the time, because he was a tough-on-crime Democrat, he was for the death penalty. And this guy, if I remember correctly, the controversy around, I don't remember his name, the controversy around the guy who was up for execution was that he was mentally, whatever the term, he was mentally disabled in some way. So there was, in fact, there was an argument. His defense lawyers had argued that when he went to trial initially, that he didn't even necessarily know what he was doing when he committed the murder, that he was out of control, because he had some sort of mental deficiency. So the controversy was, is it okay, not just that, is it okay to execute people, because Arkansas, southern state, very pro-death penalty. The argument that was going on in the state was, well, is it okay to execute someone with some sort of mentally handicap, or is that just inhumane? Bill Clinton, during his campaign to prove how tough on crime he was, not only did he not do anything in terms of offering a stay of execution, which he had the power to do as governor. Governors can do that. He could have done something to intervene. He did the opposite. To show how big and tough he was on crime, he flew home in the middle of his campaign. He suspended his campaign to fly home to Little Rock, Arkansas, to be there, to be present, to preside over the execution of this mentally deficient individual who was being executed. Just to prove, and come on, I didn't believe then, and I don't believe now, that Bill Clinton in his heart actually really believed that that was the correct or the moral or ethical thing to do. But he had to score points with the people who thought he was going to be soft on crime to prove what a new Democrat he really was. So that's what he did. I've never forgiven him for that.
I remember that.
Do you remember that? Because most people I talk about that do don't remember that.
Because I was like 9 years old, but
Yeah.
like very, very, very vaguely, like I remember hearing or seeing. I couldn't tell you like details
Yeah.
or the name of the guy.
Yeah.
By the way,
Just hideous. I will never forgive him for that.
I got a text from Mike, and he says, actually, I just had to re-up my subscription for being a straight white male.
Oh, well, good for him.
Yeah.
Good for him, Mike. You got to fight that gay militant agenda. They're gonna recruit us all.
I wonder if it's like when you get like a magazine subscription and they send you like one of those like little cards if you want to like renew your subscription. I wonder if you get like, do you want to renew your like straight subscription?
See, I've never gotten one of those, so now I'm worried. I'm gonna have to go see Marcus Bachman. Jesus can help me. We have time for one more call. Hi, welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed. Who's on the line?
Matt, me again. By the way, that guy was not guilty if he was Afro-American. We studied that in college.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
can't remember his name, but when I was in psychology, I was taking an extended course in psychology on this, and it was proven they wanted to rush it, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
It was proven because Bill Clinton wanted to make him look like himself a hero,
Yep.
and it was proven that this young man was not guilty.
It's heartbreaking.
Okay? We'll talk more about that, too.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Norm.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, Norm.
Yeah, that's interesting. But that's the big news of the day. Do you have anything else to say about that? I might make a couple more comments before we wrap up, but we're almost out of time. The hour goes quick.
About that specifically.
Yeah, about DOMA and
Oh, well,
Prop 8 and all
I
that,
mean-
the news, the big news of today.
I actually, the whole Prop 8 thing, because of it, I've learned more about how our court system works and everything, and what exactly like happened, and something about the Ninth Circuit and how that's where it got struck down. And so I learned today, not our Micah, different Micah explained everything to me and what certain terms mean. So I'm learning things.
Okay,
And
good.
I mean, I think you mentioned before, like, the striking down DOMA was definitely a huge step, but we need to get to the point where it's legal in all the
Yes.
states. And I mentioned on Facebook the other day or yesterday that, everyone's always talks about, like, the Constitution, and they quote the Constitution and this and that, but I quoted another document which states, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And when you have something like DOMA or even civil unions where you're like, you can kind of have some rights,
Right.
that's not equal,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, I thought that was a good compromise at the time, but and maybe it was. Like I said, maybe we had to get there to get here, but we're getting there. So that's a good thing. Don't forget Little Mel's show this Monday night at midnight, live on IPMNation.com.
Yes.
No boundaries.
Yes.
Who's your guest?
My guest is Cage from Stillwell Angel. We're actually he does a lot of like goal setting and life achievement
good.
stuff. And it will be part 1 of my Epic Kiss trivia.
Yes, yes.
Because the week after, I have this guy right here. So he's...
Kiss is my favorite band.
And it's Cage's favorite band.
I will be
so
victorious.
We are going to see who is the bigger Kiss fan. And also, I just want to say quickly, I know we didn't talk about it, but yay, Wendy Davis.
Yes, yes. And that will do it. Don't forget also the live radio edition of Matt Connarton Unleashed, Saturday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern on IPMNation.com. Don't forget to come back 4 p.m. Norm and Friends, and we'll be discussing more of what we discussed today. And at 6 p.m. Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades, Gary Hopper will be here, and Charlene Craig, a frequent guest of that show, is coming on. Looking forward to seeing her. Always
He
a good
doesn't
time.
hop too much.
What's that?
Gary Hopper, he doesn't hop too much.
No.
You should like hop into the studio.
Maybe on
one
Easter
day.
he does.
Yeah.
I hope so. Maybe he has a pogo stick or something. I don't know.
That sounds fun.
It does. That'll do it for this week's live television edition of blah, blah, blah. Did you hear that? I kind of had an issue there at the end. Live television edition. I don't know why that's so hard for me to say. Of Matt Connarton Unleashed. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next time.